Hello and welcome back to the game room. You know what I love? Video games. You know what I love talking about? Games. It's funny, a lot of people that cover games these days seem to hate them. But hey, not me, and not the 1,485 of you beautiful people that are watching this channel. For today's video, because we talked about two-player NES games, I also was a big fan of two-player SNES games. Now, surprisingly enough, I would say the two-player offerings on the NES, in my opinion, at least for simultaneous co-op, were better. I don't know why that is. There's a few goats on the SNES, which we'll get to, but the outliers aren't as nuanced as, say, something like, Marble Madness or Snake, Rattle, and Roll. But let's get to the games.
There's a lot of games out there, some of which you've never even heard of. That's where I come in. My name's Luke. I've been playing games since the age of 2, and I have no life. This is my game room.
So I did mention that there are some of the GOATs, so let's get through them pretty quickly. You can't talk about two-player co-op games without mentioning Contra 3. Not as easy as the NES Contra, not as approachable, mainly because it doesn't allow you to beat the game unless you play it on hard mode, and it doesn't have the Konami code that gives you the 30-man live code, so you gotta actually get good at it. And to be honest, I don't know if I ever did beat this game on hard mode growing up. I remember beating it on normal all the time, because that wasn't too bad, because you can store your weapons, you got the bomb clearing effect, and by and large it is a better game. It's just not one that you can as easily run through. Still, a lot of fun. Gotta mention Contra 3. Another game you gotta talk about if you're talking about two-player games is Street Fighter 2. And I got Turbo, you got Super Street Fighter 2, and then of course you need to have the original Street Fighter 2. I know I got all of them. I even have the 30th anniversary one that sets your console on fire. I don't have Alpha 2 though. I was never crazy about the Alpha graphics. But yes, if you were looking for a fun two-player game, Street Fighter 2 was where it was at. I remember setting up tournaments, having it on paper sheets, showing little brackets, using the code to get the different colored guys, and then when Turbo came out, you could play as the other 4 bosses. Super Street Fighter introduced Fei Long and DJ and Cammy and all that kind of stuff. Everyone knows about it, and gotta be on this video if we're not talking about it very much. And also, you can't not talk about Zombies Ate My Neighbor. One of the best co-op games I can think of. Two-player, you go through these very hard, surprisingly hard levels. My buddy Sean tried playing this before, and we didn't get very far. You get past the giant baby, and then you're dead. So that's another solid one. You can't talk about two-player games without Super Mario Kart. And specifically for Super Mario Kart, it's the battle mode. Now, to this day, this might still be my favorite battle mode. Yeah, it's only 2 players, but this is back when the items were attached to question mark blocks on the ground, that when you ran over it, the item was gone for the rest of the match. So you eventually would run out of items doing it this way, versus the other games where they regenerate. And it just had such cool nuances of going through, jumping into the water area. You could jump and find other item blocks, and just a lot of fond memories with it. And lastly, the last GOAT before we start talking about the more obscure ones, TMNT, Turtles in Time. Possibly the greatest beat 'em up ever to be existed. I mean, Shredder's Revenge just came out, which is just a love letter to this. One of the greatest arcade ports. I mean, we all know about Turtles in Time. Phenomenal game, always fun. Now, some ones you may not think about. Well, let's start off. Now, some of these games aren't the greatest games. Like I was saying, the NES list had far better quality games, but still, these are some fun two-player games. And surprisingly enough, the Super Nintendo version of Beavis and Butt-Head, much more co-op friendly, I'd say, than the Genesis version, which I don't even know if the Genesis version had two-player. This one, just kind of your standard side-scroller, but you can interact with each other, jump on each other. Now, you share a health bar, so that's kind of a bummer. You do share a health bar. Beavis and Butt-Head have the same health bar, which is kind of like them having the same mind. But you can choose a different stage. All the stages are fun enough to go through. It wasn't my favorite game growing up, but as a two-player game where you need something mindless to go through, solid choice and worth picking up, fairly cheap and fairly stupid. Now, one that is not cheap is a game called Knights of the Round. Now, Knights of the Round is a beat 'em up. Capcom beat 'em up. There's been re-releases of it, I think, on the Capcom beat 'em up collection for the Switch and other systems. So that's honestly the best place to go check it out because you have other good two-player games there. But this is a solid game. Not my favorite beat 'em up on the system. Obviously, that goes to Turtles in Time. But still, if you're a fan of Arthurian lore, your characters do get some semblance of progression throughout. They do have that annoyance where you use your special ability, you'll lose health. But the sprites are big. You have 3 very distinguished play styles with Percival, Lancelot, and Arthur. And just a fun game all around, and definitely one of those ones that has gone insanely stupid price-wise in recent years. Now, a game that is not great, but is just, I don't know what it is. It kind of combines my love of the Excitebike track editor with RC Pro-Am, and it doesn't do either very well, but it does it just well enough to be unique and also two-player, and that is Radical Psycho Machine Racing. And this might be one of the cheapest games that I talk about here. I would imagine this goes for more than $5-7. But it has the ability for you to create your own track. And you can make a really excessive track that goes up and down. It has bumps. You can change the terrain. But where it gets you is that the things have to be matching. So you can't have ice terrain lead into dirt terrain. But it won't tell you that until you go to save. So you'll get these things where you create this long, intricate course. It has multiple pathways, some that lead nowhere, some that are just a loop. And then you go to save it to go and play it, and it'll say, oh, this doesn't work. And I remember this happening. I didn't remember this till I was recording the footage, which once again, I recorded all the footage for this in two-player mode, or I'm using demo footage, or I'm stealing it online, probably for the goat stuff. But I didn't remember. So yeah, one person doing 2 players. So yeah, remember it's gonna suck. But I didn't remember that happening when I went to the map editor and tried to do it. It just like this flood of memories of frustration came back to me when I couldn't do it. And eventually I just deleted out of my editing and like, whatever, I'll just ride the track the way it is. And it plays a lot like an RC Pro-Am as far as you can attack each other, but the frame rate is god awful. And it just does not play well, but I have fond ass memories because this is one of the first Super Nintendo games we got, and at the time we thought it was great. Even though it played like ass, we knew it controlled like ass. The graphics were so crazy, and it was 2-player because RC Pro-Am wasn't 2-player. So we really like this game a lot, far better than it deserved. Another 2-player game, a fighting game, but it's more of a almost like an arena fighting game. It's based off of an arcade game, which at the time I didn't know. I just loved Godzilla, and I loved King Kong. And so I think I got this for Christmas in 1992, maybe, 91, somewhere around then. And that is King of the Monsters. Whenever this game came out, I was so excited because it had friggin' Godzilla on the front. They got me. Godzilla killing, whatever that guy, the beetle guy's name. What was his name? It wasn't Gamora. Was it Gamora? Something like that. And I just was so excited to play this. It's not a great game. It's not a great game. It's not a terrible game. And for 2 players, you know, once again, a lot of these games I'm suggesting here are things where you got a buddy over for a weekend or at night, and you guys just playing a bunch of games. This is a good one. You pop it in, maybe 10-15 minutes, get some play out of it, see who's the king of the monsters, and then put it down. I was expecting, or at least I was hoping for something more of a Rampage experience, because it was fun going around destroying stuff. But it is a little limited in what it can do. You only have 4 players you can choose from. A decent enough 2-player experience, and just showing you what kind of barrel we're scraping in this video. Alright, now one that is actually very good. This is one that my dad was a huge fan of. He actually bought it. Another thing I didn't know was an arcade port, and that game is Rampart. And you know it's good because it even says 2 players simultaneous action. They knew what they had. And you know what? It's actually fantastic. This is one of my favorite 2-player games we're even going to talk about right now. And that's just because Rampart's a really fun game. For those who don't know, the way Rampart works is you get a castle. At the beginning, you select a castle, and then you place cannons in it. Once you have an attack phase, you then shoot your cannons at the opponent's castle to break the wall. And then once the wall has been broken, your castle's been broken, you get a build phase to repair the wall. And then once the build phase is completed, any castle that's then been fixed, or if you grab a new castle, you then get new cannons to lay in there. But if you're not able to repair your castle, and you have these Tetris-like blocks to fix it, the game is over and the other person wins. And it's surprisingly a lot of strategy and very, very fun. And even playing the 2-player mode while I was capturing this footage, it did have me want to just start playing the game some more because I forgot how enjoyable this game actually can be. Now, probably the game that's the best 2-player game of this entire list, that's not one of the GOATs I talked about, which has a sequel, by the way, that I've never played, is Joe and Mac. Now, this was my absolute favorite as a kid. It had the ability you could play as Joe or Mac. Mac was the blue guy, Joe was the green guy. My favorite color was blue. I was always player number 2. He's player number 2, so it just worked out. When you're on the main map, selecting the levels, kind of Super Mario style, both characters can move around, and I think even select. It's just really well handled. The combat is pretty archaic. Not much happens. You can pick up power-ups that then allow you to throw a bone or throw wheels or throw fire and things of that nature, and the hitboxes aren't perfect. Secrets abound, discovering what the purple pterodactyls will lead to, and there's tons of little multiple pathways, and just a really, really solid 2-player experience. I know it's been re-released tons of places. I think there might even be an HD remake right now, so definitely one to check out and pick up if you haven't seen it yet. But Joe and Mac, highly recommended, and I will get to the second one of these days. All right, now this next one is not necessarily an unknown game, but I felt like putting it in here because it's not quite GOAT status, but it is still a very, very exceptional game, and that is Mortal Kombat 2. Now, Mortal Kombat 2, not Mortal Kombat 1, Nintendo backtracked on everything. They added blood, they added the gruesome fatalities, you had a much better roster. It's just a much better game, in my opinion. Much like Street Fighter 2 doesn't really start until Street Fighter 2. Mortal Kombat doesn't really start until Mortal Kombat 2. And this game is just so much fun. You have the finishers, you have the secrets of Smoke and Noob Saibot. And the only negative I can say about this game is the fact that it doesn't have Goro in it. But everything else is really solid, and it was just the fun of seeing the fatalities. I mean, let's face it, it was the fun of seeing the fatalities, trying to pull off those ridiculous combinations, getting the little code books, or looking in the magazines for them, and then the best part is always when you see the finish him, and then the character, when you're trying to do the fatality, moves around like they're juddering back and forth, but then the scene drops black, and then something crazy happens. It was just always fun, always fun. Maybe not the best game fighting-wise. I mean, Street Fighter 2 is probably a better game for that, but for the enjoyment and satisfaction when you did win, it really ruined me for Street Fighter. Once this game came out, it really ruined me for Street Fighter because after I beat someone in Street Fighter, I didn't get that satisfaction of murdering them. Yeah. So there you go. All right, another 2-player game you wouldn't necessarily think about is a personal favorite of mine for the Super Nintendo, and it has a great single-player mode, but it also has a really fun 2-player mode, and that is Lemmings. Lemmings is very, very enjoyable for 2-player. You have a 2-player face-to-face. Each team has their own color Lemmings, but you can collect either color Lemming. So you can get all your opponent's guys, you can get all your guys, you can spend the whole match trying to screw the other guy, you can just try and do, sabotage or go straight for your base. It's just... It's a fun game. It's not as much. I mean, it has a shelf life. There's only so much you can take, and once you see where something's going, or once you've lost the match, sometimes you just want it to be over. Which I think they allow you to do that with the instant kill everyone. But still, just Lemmings in general is an underrated series in my opinion, and I had a lot of fun playing this in the day. And I think I even played this recently, either with Jen or my little brother or something like that. But a lot of fun. Now, another game pretty much in the same vein as Knights of the Round would be King of Dragons. Now, King of Dragons is probably, in my opinion, a better game than Knights of the Round. You have 5 people to choose from, each one of the classes, although it's really technically, even though there's 5 different classes, there's 2 classes that play similar. I think the Archer and the Mage play similar, the Paladin and the Warrior, maybe the I can't remember the 5th one, maybe the 5th one's a Dwarf, but either way, there's a ton of levels in this game. There's a ton of levels. Me and my buddy Sean would play the hell out of this. I want to say the footage we're watching here is actually from us playing it in 2015 when I had no idea what to use that footage for. So apologies, it's not from the analog NT. This is from when I used to actually capture from an old Super Nintendo on RC component cables. But still, You level up in this. There's levels of varying degree of difficulty and length. Sometimes the level will be 2 screens. Sometimes it'll go on forever, but just a lot of fun. Really enjoy King of Dragons. This one is close to TMNT 4, but I think Turtles gets the edge just because it's easier to beat and just a little bit more consistent. This one has kind of drops and some severe difficulty spikes. All right, now moving on here. These last 2 games are going to be games that I discovered in my adult collector life, so not necessarily things that I knew about growing up or that I had familiarity with. So one of them I discovered from the channel is a game called Firestriker. Now, Firestriker is a very unique, almost Arkanoid-like, a pinball style as well, but it has the ability to play 4 players in it, but you can play through the main campaign as 2 players. Now, when you play on 1 player, the second player, the guy in the robe, just sits down and acts sort of like a guardrail at the bottom, but when you play 2 player, each person can control one of them. And it's surprisingly a lot of fun. It's surprisingly a lot of fun. I really enjoyed Firestriker. This was a game I picked up on a whim several years ago. And unfortunately, my copy has some issues. Like, it glitches out. It doesn't always want to work, but I was able to get it on for this. And definitely one that I would play a lot more if I had someone else to play it with on a regular basis. Maybe Cammy. Maybe Cam, when you get older, we can play that one. That'd be a fun one for the 2 of us. But still, big recommendation on that. If you can find it cheaper. I mean, I think I picked it up when it was around $40, and now it's over $100, maybe even more than that, because prices are insane. Another great co-op game. This one might be my wife's favorite game that she's played ever, at least especially for the channel, and that is Disney's Goof Troop. A phenomenal 2-player game. You can play as either Goofy or Max, and each one has a slightly different skill set, and just a lot of fun. It plays similar to a Legend of Zelda style tile, or like screen clear map. There's 5 different zones, very approachable, easily beaten in a night, which we did. Still to this day, the only game my wife has beaten in one sitting, and it's easy to do it because it's a solid, fun game. I think it's Capcom, right? Yeah, this is, Capcom when Capcom was doing Disney right, and this might be them at the height of their powers on the Super Nintendo. Highly recommend Disney's Goof Troop. All right, another one. I didn't even know this game was co-op for the longest time, and part of that is because it doesn't have a title screen that gives you the option for it. You have to select it by using a button prompt, which is in the manual, and if you don't have the manual, you just have the loose cartridge, you wouldn't know that, and that is Firepower 2000. Now, you don't find very many vertical shooters that are co-op. This one is. And each one of you can play as a different vehicle. You have one who's a tank and one who's a helicopter, and you have slightly different play styles depending on who you are. The tank can shoot in different directions, whereas the helicopter can only shoot forward, but it can fly over obstacles and things like that. And it's pretty solid game. Pretty solid game. This is one of those hidden gem type games that you hear people talk about that wasn't huge back in the day, but a pretty solid get. I've enjoyed it, and it wasn't super expensive when I picked it up, maybe $20, but that was 5-6 years ago. So Lord knows it's probably $300 now. And I actually have 2 more, but one of them is not actually here. So the first game we're going to talk about is a wrestling game. So once again, I've been chasing that wrestling game high my whole life. Well, Super WrestleMania for the SNES was not that game. Didn't enjoy it that much. What was really fun, though, for the SNES was WWF Royal Rumble. I don't know why I enjoyed this one so much more than the Super WrestleMania, because it didn't have Jake the Snake or Hulk Hogan or a lot of the characters I really had known and loved back in the time, but I guess because one of the things this really did was it had the Royal Rumble mode, which doesn't play like the actual Royal Rumble, but because I was such a huge fan of the Royal Rumble, I think that kind of got me hyped for it. And you could have up to 6 or so characters in the ring at once, which was insanity. For a Super Nintendo game to have that many characters in the ring at once just blew my mind. And you could play double tag team, tornado tag, I want to say. And just, it was a solid wrestling game. To this day, I still don't understand how the controls work or how the grappling works or even how to throw. That was the other frustrating thing about the Royal Rumble is that you get thrown out of the match. In later games, they would improve this by when you would play Royal Rumble matches on the THQ games, they would have you take over the next person who comes in. Not in this one. No, there's no jokes. You get thrown out of the ring, you watch the rest of the match. You're out. You're done. You gotta wait until the match is over. So that was always the worst part, is you'd be playing it and then you and the other and player 2 would get knocked out, and then you'd have to watch while the last 4 or 5 people are still coming into the ring. And even to this day, though, I still enjoy it, which is funny enough. It's an LJN game, huh? All right. And lastly, I didn't grab the game because I always do this. All right. Lastly, the last game I want to talk about is one of the more expensive ones that did just have a remake called Pocky Rocky Reshrined. This is a very fun co-op game. Very fun. I recently discovered it in my older life. Jen and I played it, I want to say last year or the year before, right around the same time we did Goof Troop. And this is a phenomenal time. Now, it is very difficult to get through in co-op because of the way it has the diving work. When you dive in the game, you can get the other character to make him spin out and then lose health. I don't know how the hell you're supposed to beat this game without utilizing the dive move. So I don't know how you would get past the last boss without that happening. But still, phenomenal game, and one of my bigger recommendations for co-op games on the system if you can find it cheap. If not, pick up the re-release because it is well worth it. Alright guys, well that was another glut of games for the Super Nintendo. Let me know if you have any suggestions for some co-op games that I missed. I hit most of the ones that I had familiarity with and ones that I've recently discovered. Like I said, the quality of some of these games is not great, but if you're looking for some of the ones that aren't the GOATs, Joe and Mac, Rampart, Lemmings, Pocky Rocky, Goof Troop, you know, there's some solid ones in here. Definitely some solid ones in here. So let me know what you thought of this video. As a reminder, I release a new video every Tuesday. I have a Patreon if you'd like to support the channel and get some more inside scoops on what's going on. And as always, it's been so nice getting a hold of you. Take care.